Hi, my name's Chris Candy, and this is the Never Not Run podcast. Or no.
Or do the NNR for
This is the Never Not Run podcast. I'm your host, Chris Candy.
And I'm Mark Nieto.
What episode is this?
Every time.
No, I'm not. You don't need to put this on there. I was asking you like before we were recording.
Okay, I'll cut this out. But
leave it in. Leave it in.
We're at episode 22. Dude,
this is season 2, episode 22. Never Not Run Pod 2023. We're back, baby.
We are back, and we took a hiatus. We were gone for what, 2 months?
We were gone for 2 months, and everyone freaked out.
Yeah, we needed a recovery period.
Everyone thought we had disappeared. Everyone thought NNR had hung up their shoes, put their hat in the closet, threw their watch in the trash.
The stress fractures got to us, but
we're back, baby.
And boy, are we back, because today's guest, it reminds me of why I love doing this pod, because Witt Wisebram he's awesome. He had so many amazing stories from his days as a thru-hiker and an ultra runner, and I don't know. Would you want to touch on any of the things he brought up?
We touch on a lot in the pod. Witt and I know each other from our time in the punk rock world. He had a band called The Wild, and I had a band named Choto Ghetto. And we met through our friend Jeff Rosenstock and shared record labels. And just over the years, I started to see he was getting into running, and I was getting into running around the same time, but he was getting into running in a whole other way. He was just completing all these incredible feats and hiking trails and, Pacific Crest to, the Moab. I would just see him talk about all of these on his Facebook, and it was coming time for us to get him on the pod. And boy, oh boy, were we lucky.
Yeah, I found out about Witt, unrelated to you actually, just from nerding out and being a fan of thru hiking and FKT attempts. I saw Witt in a documentary about a FKT attempt on the Arizona Trail, and then noticed that he was following NNR. But for those that don't know, but FKT stands for fastest known time. So it's people that set out on these kind of established routes where they just try to go as fast as possible. A lot of them are longer than normal, longer than like a marathon, let's say. But yeah, just these, like traditionally a trail you might hike or backpack on. And yeah, these people just go as fast as they can for as long as they can.
I learned a lot, actually. There's a lot of that world I didn't know that I learned about in this pod. And I'm really excited to share it with you guys. So this is episode 22 of the Never Not Run pod.
I'll just dive right into it. Dude, how are you, man? What's going on? I haven't seen you for forever.
It's been a long time, man. Yeah, it's good to see you. Things have been good. Kind of like been on this running long trail adventure life for a few years now. It was, kind of like a natural transition out of punk rock into this, just like having to make time for this type of stuff and, holding down shitty jobs for the flexibility and, so it's, and it's kind of like a DIY effort to make this stuff happen. So not that far off from what I was doing before, just instead of music, it's been running. So
I love it. Yeah. We have a bunch of questions in regards to that. And so we want to get into all of them. But I guess just to start, like, I'm really glad you're here. It's really good to see you. Just for the listeners, Witt and I do know each other through the punk rock world. Our bands did play one show, I believe, together, but we have a ton of mutual friends in the punk rock scene. Jeff Rosenstock, just to name a few. Um, but you were in a band called The Wild. I had a band called Choto Ghetto, kind of punk rocky DIY spirit. And yeah, that's so true. Going into running is just, it goes hand in hand. But I guess to get started, I wanted to ask, and we ask people kind of this question often, but for you, for running, like, do you remember your first mile?
Yeah, actually I do. I don't know if it was my first mile, but I remember doing like the presidential fitness challenge when I was in elementary school. Where it was like a few days of PE class where you had to do like pull-ups and sit-ups and stuff. But I remember that we had this like outdoor track. It wasn't like a track, it was like a gravel loop, but I don't remember how long it was, probably no more than a quarter mile. Probably less than that, but yeah, I do remember those days, like running like the mile challenge in like blue jeans, in the middle of like an elementary school day. Um, and I remember what's funny is like the thing I remember about it was like there was like up on the wall was like these like dot matrix printer things of like the fastest mile times that people had run. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was some kid who was like a couple years older than me that had gone like sub 6. He was like, like 5:45 or something like that. And I always remember just like, I want to beat that, but like I had no concept of like how difficult that would be. I don't think I was like a fast runner. I'm still not a fast runner, like, so that was, yeah, I do remember it actually. But I didn't really run again. Like I played a little soccer in school, but like I wasn't like an athlete, I was kind of like a stoner art music kid for most of high school and college. I always liked outdoor sports, like I was always into backpacking and rock climbing and stuff like that. Um, and but yeah, just like never considered myself an athlete, and was never like really good at stuff. I played soccer, but I was like the goalkeeper, so didn't really do much running there. um,
You're going to fit in just fine on the Never Not Run pod.
yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, for a lot of, especially Americans, that presidential fitness test is always like it's either like a moment of pride or a moment of shame. Where I think a lot of people, do you remember the patches? Did they do this at your school where you got a red patch or a blue patch depending on how kind of elite you were?
I don't remember that, but it's possible. I just remember getting like a certificate, from signed by the president or whatever.
And so I guess when did that kind of change over for you? Or maybe it really hasn't even changed, but like when you were playing music and touring, were you still getting in runs and going on backpacking trips? Like what were those years like for you?
No, it was like the opposite. I think I had reached probably the least, fitness of my life. And honestly, it became part of the motivation for wanting to like dial in some type of process or practice that, you know, emphasized my physical health. I'm sure Chris can speak to this, but it's like, it's a pretty rough lifestyle. Like, luckily I was like never like a huge drinker or like whatever, but it's still like, a couple beers a night every night. And like,
Mm-hmm.
no, there's really not time
Yeah.
to like go on runs. Like, I've actually hung out with Jeff and his crew a couple times now, and it's funny because like John will go down to the treadmill in the hotel lobby, but like we weren't staying in hotels,
Yeah.
like we were staying on friends' couches and stuff, and I played in the band till I was in my early 30s, and yeah, it just kind of reached this low like of physical health, which a lot of times I think can influence your mental health. So I was really like looking for something that could change like everything for me. And luckily, when I was 19, I hiked the whole Appalachian Trail.
Wow.
It was just like something before I went to college that growing up in Georgia, the trail starts up in North Georgia, and like I graduated high school, and before I started college, I hiked the whole Appalachian Trail, and so here I am like 12 years after that, kind of like thinking like what can I do. I was also starting to burn out on playing music and stuff like that, and I remembered that I had always wanted to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, which goes up the whole West Coast through California, Oregon, and Washington. And so in 2015, I did that, basically off the couch, like the first couple of weeks, walking through the deserts around San Diego, and then up into the Angeles Crest right around you guys.
Wow.
Was brutal. I mean, I was limping. Just I had two trekking poles. Just like not sure. Like my knees were just on fire. Like my body was hurting a lot. But after a few hundred miles, after like a month, it just clicked. And what was interesting is, as bad as it hurt, like I could still feel this like rhythm that when you do something like this, like one of these long trails, like it almost becomes like muscle memory. It's like I can still go back and play like the original Mario on NES, and like it's like my fingers just like do it, like so I could like feel that was still there, like the rhythm was still there, but it was hard to like achieve that rhythm and keep it going until I like walked myself into shape. But being out there, it kind of reminded me that like this is it, like this is what I love, like this is my passion. And it's kind of always has been, even though it hasn't been in the forefront of my life, and again, like when you're touring and playing music, especially in like the DIY context, there's not a lot of time to do other stuff that you want to do, you know what I mean? It's kind of all in on that. Or maybe for some of us that aren't good at achieving balance, but
I used to bring a jump rope with like Mike Park. So for the listeners, Witt had his band The Wild had a record out with Asian Man Records. Mike Park was on the pod, and I would bring like a jump rope on those tours and do that. And some tours I'd go on runs. I remember I was like working for a dude, and I had a bus access, so I was able to like go. I remember I didn't bring running shoes, so I went and bought a pair at like a local running store in like Boston, and was just like hitting miles left and right. But yeah, you're right. Like the DIY music scene is so grueling unto itself in like a completely different way, but it taps that mental reserve in the same capacity. I totally relate. Yeah.
I think actually what happened is like I still don't really consider myself much of an athlete, but it's like the same creative fulfillment you can apply to running, right? Like for me, it's like when I get out there, especially on the trails, there's this like narrative aspect, whether it's like my daily run, or whether it's a really long distance race or something. Like it's like what's the story that like I want to tell here, and like it can become this like Shakespearean like tragedy, or it can become this like triumph of will and spirit, but if you kind of frame it in like a way that it's a creative process, like that's what it's about for me. Like that's what I love about it. But I hated running. I mean, even in 2015, like I was never a runner. Like I didn't start running until 2018, like it was sort of just by necessity. Like I had gone on after the Pacific Crest Trail to hike the Continental Divide Trail, which goes down the middle of the country. It's a 3,100 mile trail. And this is all like with backpacks on, camping every night, that kind of stuff. So you're not running, but by the time I got to the end of that trail, I was like cruising through fall in New Mexico, and I was doing a lot of like road walking along these like, New Mexico like scenic highways, and it was like, okay, I just busted 30 miles out today, and and then I got home to Atlanta, and I was just feeling like I was really missing that rhythm, or those endorphins or whatever it is. So I would go to the state park and try and just like hike in the afternoons after work or whatever, but it just wasn't like scratching the itch. So I thought to myself, like, maybe I should try like running these trails, you know. So I just had this one 8 mile loop that for months and months I just tried to run the whole loop, you know, and it took months to like get to the point where it was like, okay, this staircase, oh, this long climb, like, can I link it up? Can I like get this done, you know? But what I found is like the rhythm of running it did like kind of scratch the itch, like that it did actually fulfill what I was like looking for. And then that kind of led to a crazy few years, you know. So
Yeah, this brings up a might be a dumb question, but I am really interested in if you have any like, methods for pacing. Like, how do you approach something that's that long? Like, do you have a conscious thing where you're like, okay, I'm gonna, you know, run 5 minutes, walk 5 minutes, or is it just based on feel, or like how structured is your pacing plan when you're hitting these like super long attempts?
um well, it depends on, you know, the distance. I mean, for 24-hour or 100 mile, like I feel more dialed to like certain pacing, like I want to make sure I'm hitting certain like marks. But for like a 10-day race or like a 250-mile race, like I'm um sort of more like I need to make sure that I'm just not be like going too fast, you know. A lot of that is actually about convincing myself to slow down. It's, you know, when I kind of like did the Moab 240 and the Cocodona 250 back to back and went top five at both of those, the lesson from that was actually about patience. You know, it was like letting people pass me at the beginning and just not letting my ego be like, I should try and keep up with them. You know, it was about saying like, you know, walk like, you know, this is a long game, like, you know, like,
Yeah.
so it was kind of the opposite of like keeping myself to a certain pace. It was like trying to convince myself to not care about it, you know, which is sometimes a little more difficult. And that's kind of where I am now. I've been kind of on like a little sabbatical, and you know, I quit wearing a watch when I run. I quit even tracking mileage like week to week at this point. You know, I'm just enjoying it, just doing like what I want when I want, and it's super fun. You know.
Yeah. Speak to that, because like that's something that just came to mind as you were talking. Like, God, there's so much data and matrix that have come into this thing that we love. And, you know, you have had those moments. I've had those moments where, you know, your watch doesn't log the run and you kind of freak out. And like, I think about that often, about how much numbers have kind of dictated my relationship with running. And so, you know, what was that transition like for you to be like, I don't need this shit?
Well, it was, you know, it was weird because I never used that stuff for the first couple of years I was running. You know, I had like a Timex watch and would just do the math in my head. You know, I'd be like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I know that this milestone is 5 miles in. This is how long it took me to get here. So this is my pace or whatever. Maybe I should do the next 5 miles a little faster or whatever, you know, like it wasn't. But in 2019, the winter of 2019, I got a coach for the first time who was actually like my hero in the sport. Like I was really stoked. He's a guy named Joe McConaughey, goes by the trail name String Bean, but he's like, you know, he holds the records for running the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, the Arizona Trail. He's run a 12-hour, 30-minute 100-miler. You know, he's just a total badass. And he was kind of like, you need to get a watch if, you know, if we're going to do like a coaching setup, because I need data. Like you need to like be able to look at this stuff. So that was the first time I ever got a watch. And, you know, I enjoyed it for a while. It was sort of like a game, you know. It was like oh cool, this data is actually like really fun to like play with and stuff. But I think over, you know, the next couple of years, like it became more of like a burden, you know, to wear that
Sure.
thing, like to feel dogmatic about the results that I was like seeing when I was going over the data, you know. And I kind of just realized that that's not what it's about for me, you know. And if it's creating these like feelings of like frustration and guilt and shame and stuff like that, I gotta like, I mean, take the burden off, just like take the fucking watch off, you know? It's like as easy as that, man. Like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so now, I mean, they are super useful, like in a race, you know, because I've never really used it for much more than just knowing how far I've gone and kind of glancing down to see like what my pace is like. And it's like, I need to speed up a little bit or slow down a little bit. But, um, yeah, I've never been like a data driven runner. I'm not like a data driven person in general. So, um, but yeah, it was an interesting experiment.
Yeah, as kind of as an aside, I first became aware of you because a friend of mine sent me the Arizona Trail documentary about Joe's FKT attempt, and
Yeah.
you're featured prominently in that because you were kind of pacing him, doing it with him, and it was surreal because I think a day or two later you started following the Never Not Run account, and I was like, oh my god, this dude is following us. And then I think I mentioned it to Chris, and Chris was like, oh yeah, I know that guy. That's Witt. So it was a weird mashup of two worlds. But what's it like having Joe as a coach? Is it, I mean, what are the weeks like for you to prepare for something like a FKT attempt or a 24-hour race?
Well, like when like Joe doesn't coach me anymore. Like we kind of after the Arizona Trail, we kind of like we're like he's like, dude, I can't like charge you anymore. Like it doesn't feel right. So at this point, we're kind of just buds. I don't have a training plan right now. Like if I'm preparing for something, I'll be like, yo, Joe, can you hook me up with like a couple months of a training plan? And he's like, sure, whatever. But like, I don't know. I mean, when I started with him, I think he was a little surprised and didn't really know what to do with me because my job, I work in the summers on the Appalachian Trail, is what's called a ridge runner. So my job is to cover like 50 to 60 miles per week for work on the AT on like pretty brutal terrain. And so I was getting ready for my second attempt at the Moab 240 that fall, and he's like, well, just start sending me like your daily stuff, and my daily stuff at that point was, generally 20 to 25 miles a day with like 5,000 to 6,000 feet of elevation gain. Wow. And that was like every day, wow. Except for maybe one day off or something a week. And it wasn't super fast, like, but I was like, Joe, what do you consider a long run? He's like, I'd say like, what do you consider running versus hiking? And cause he like his thing at the beginning was like, you're a great hiker, but, you're not really running. And he's like, well, I would say like a 15-minute mile or below is running, so I was trying to do those days averaging out at 15-minute miles, which turns out like, in most of the big 200 plus mile races, if you can maintain a 15-minute mile, like you would probably win the race. I mean, these aren't like super fast
right
splits in these races. It's just a matter of the consistency and like staying awake. But yeah, I don't know. Like he kind of would cater like to what I was gonna do. So like when I was getting ready for the Across the Years 10-day race, that looked a lot different than like getting ready for Cocodona 250. So
you've done all these like super long races and like these attempts, like, and I would always see on Instagram you like, or excuse me, Facebook, you'd be like hitting these things. Oh, about to go, Pacific Crest or just finished, and I was always so impressed. And Mike Park would always compare me to you, because he'd be like, you're not running enough. Look at Witt, which just went across the entire west coast of California, but I was always so inspired because I was definitely getting into running around the same time, just in a different kind of environment. But it always made me wonder, for you, like when you're on these long trail runs, you touched on it briefly, like, what does your day-to-day look like? How are you sleeping? How are you keeping yourself, fueled? What does that day-to-day look like?
And, it's pretty different. Like something like a 10-day loop race, you're running around a 1 mile loop for 10 days. So what that looks like is I have, I'm in my camper van, which has been my home for like 4 years now.
Cool.
And that's basically, you park it along the course around, like along the loop, and set up like an easy up with a folding table, and just have all the shit you want like laid out on it, and kind of self crew. And setting off in a race like that, it's like, okay, I'm gonna hopefully get 4 hours of sleep a night, 4 to 5 hours of sleep. And um so the logistics of that are a little different than like something like when I set the Arizona Trail FKT, which was self-supported. I'm carrying all of my gear and all of my supplies, and there's pretty strict rules about what you can and can't do. So all of that was like mailing myself resupply boxes along the trail, having to make sure that I'm like hitting these places during hours where I can pick up that box, throw everything in my pack. Like, it's a lot harder to make sure you have enough calories, and you're dealing with like water scarcity, and so, those days kind of look like alarm goes off at 4 a.m. You got to, you want to be up like with all your stuff in your pack in 10 to 15 minutes and moving. There's not much running happening, it's mostly hiking, but you're putting in 17 hours, sometimes a day of movement. And then when it's time to stop, it's sort of like, I'm usually on my back within 10 minutes and hopefully like asleep, but you're kind of amped up from the day, even though you're like totally exhausted. So you're just kind of laying there. Like one of my stories was like the second to last night on the Arizona Trail. The water sources in southern Arizona are like basically like cattle troughs or like wildlife tanks. So it's like, I was like, all right, I'll get to this like trough, this like mud pit, and like that's where I'm going to get my water. And I'm going to sleep there tonight. And it was like probably 10 or 11 at night, and I like lay down, and a lot of the nights in the desert, I don't set up a tent or anything. I just fall on the ground with my sleeping bag. And I sat up for a second and my headlamp caught some eyes, which is pretty common, like in the woods at night. Usually it's like a deer or something like that, but this was like different. And I turned the high beam on of my lamp, and there's this like mountain lion, probably,
Oh shit.
I don't know, 50 yards, below where I'm sleeping, just looking at me. I was so dead that, I just was like, I mean, this is it. Like, if like I'm just gonna lay back down and go to sleep, and if this is the end, then this is the end. But I don't have anything left to like get up or move or run or like anything,
Holy shit.
So it gets, I mean, but again, like, I don't know, man. Like last summer, I tried to break the Pacific Crest Trail record and was on pace up into the High Sierra, but it's a mental fatigue. It's like a discipline where it's like, if you press the snooze button until, and you don't move until 5 a.m., then, you're playing catch up like the whole day. And then you do that a couple of days in a row, and you really have to like stay on this, like really tight discipline, which, that's kind of why I've been taking some time off the last few months. Is like, it's not just I wanted to give my body like a significant chance to recover after a few years of going really hard. Like, I don't think like 2 weeks or a month is like enough sometimes. Like, I gave myself 6 months and put on a little weight, and like starting to feel, like my body's regained a lot of like strength. And but also it was about letting go of like the discipline of it. It was about being like, I'm gonna eat like some fucking Swedish fish, like I'm gonna like have a beer, like I'm gonna, like that day to day when I'm like training for stuff, it's not just the running, it's like it's all of it. It's like the diet, it's like choosing training over going out with friends, it's choosing training over all that stuff. So like taking a really substantial break hasn't just been about the physical recovery. It's kind of about like the like mental health recovery and the social recovery, like,
Sure.
so, and like kind of like reinvigorating myself with like, it's like the last few runs I've done, it just felt like the first few runs I ever did. It just feels transcendent, it's like, this is incredible, like,
And anytime I feel like you focus a lot on something that you love, be it running or some other sport or fitness or your job, like it pulls you away from so many important things in life. And I totally understand that, because I obviously not at the capacity you're at, but I think Mark can relate too. When you focus on something so much, like you do forget that like that social time with friends, hanging out is so gratifying. And obviously when it's unbalanced and the other side is getting neglected too, but it really is that balance. And if you just focus solely on that, I can relate to that, and getting into that place, because it's possible, and it is depressing. You're like, what is my what why am I doing all of this if I'm not like enjoying my time with people I love?
yeah, I mean, I also do think that there's something to the community aspect of running that's amazing, like it again, it reminds me of DIY punk. I've met some of the best people, like I know, like Joe and some of my friends back in Atlanta, and when I am home in Atlanta, like I don't run alone a lot. Like it's great, like group runs, and there's like a community spirit to it, which I
Mm-hmm.
which I really value. Sometimes like you go out for like a 10-mile group run, and it's just like it just goes by. You don't even think about, but it's just a lot of time. Like the stuff I've been doing, it's like a lot of like headspace time, alone headspace time, which can be, really profound learning experience, and like can teach you a lot about yourself. But what happened this summer is like the lessons that I was kind of learning by spending so much time in my head on the PCT was like, you should stop spending so much time alone in your head. I mean,
Yeah, when that's
and
the lesson.
that wasn't the lesson I was hoping to learn, or the expectation that I thought would come, but that was the objective truth of what I was gaining from it.
You just like roll down into a town in like northern Reading, go into a bar. Hey, can I hang out with you guys?
Yeah, pretty much.
I want to give a quick shout out to a buddy of mine who also he finished the PCT. John Kyle, he goes by Dash, and he I was talking to him about doing the PCT, and he said that it becomes like virtual reality, where there's the monotony of it, like time becomes very elastic, and also in comparison to the like the 10-day races, like I was wondering how similar the mental aspect is to approaching those longer day races where you're just seeing the same surroundings over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with like the similarities between them, and it's like a constant um, challenge to find motivation and inspiration, and that's one of the things I love about it. With like a loop race, it's kind of just learning how to let time pass, and not freak out. I mean, that's like, watch a day go by, and it's pretty similar when you're out on the trail. It's it's like kind of like trying to get your head out of the way, so that time just passes, and you're just moving at whatever pace you want through time. And sometimes, like, it's hard. Like it feels like forever. It feels like the day will never end, and sometimes it's gone in the blink of an eye. Like the I mean, like hiking the PCT, like normally, like I did in 2015, versus going for a speed record was certainly like different. I mean, there was a pretty big social aspect to through hiking that I love. Forming like a crew, and making some of the best friends I've ever had. People that you spend months with, living outside and kind of sharing that goal. When I did the PCT this year or last summer, timing it with the seasons so that it works out where you don't hit snow, or you are like ahead of the fire season. It basically put me as the last person starting the PCT by like a month. And there's no one out there, like no one else is in the deserts of Southern California in mid-June, and it's brutal. It's like, 115 degrees some days, like, and you're alone. Like, no one wants to go through that, but the motivation becomes like that, that like first cool breeze at like 6:30 p.m. or 7 p.m., like when the sun finally maybe gets behind a ridge or something. And it's like the most cathartic thing I've ever like experienced in my life, like feeling like this exhalation of like the desert. It's beautiful, and honestly, like those moments are kind of like what keep you going. The thing about the loop races is that they're extremely social events, and that's kind of why I've been leaning towards them a little more. Like, everyone's on the same 1 mile loop, and it doesn't matter if you're in first place or last place, or like everyone just kind of has their own personal goal. And it's like it's the total like weirdos of running that do these like loop races, and
Yeah.
honestly, as like the FKT scene, when I got into it, it was still pretty like out there and niche. It's become like pretty, in my opinion, it's becoming more and more like corporatized and commercial, and people I think are doing stuff for like fame and notoriety instead of just sort of like this weird like subculture of running. And I'm kind of finding that more in like the timed loop races now, and meeting like a lot of the like elders of the long distance running world. Like, you're sharing the same course with a 75-year-old runner that's been doing it for their whole life, and the wisdom that you can gain from someone like that is incredible. And there's no reason why you don't just share a couple laps and have a conversation. I mean,
Yeah.
in a trail race that's point to point, like, you're gonna not see most of the people that are at the starting line again through the whole race. I mean, it's just like it spreads out, and then people are up front and people are in the back, and but on a loop, there's no like differentiation. It's like, it's pretty fun. So those are like the major differences of the two things. But yeah, I mean, I think when I started running, the thing that really interested me was like the psychological aspect of it, like more than the physical aspect. And I got to meet some like amazing runners when I was starting off. And I remember I met Scott Jurek, who's like one of the great ultra runners
Of course.
of all time. And they say these things like, like these little cliches, like, oh, it's 90% mental, like, to do this stuff. And I think that at the time, like, I kind of took it for granted. Like, I think most people sort of take it for granted, like, oh, it's just like a little anecdote or a cliche. But the more I've done it, the more I find that, like, no, it's actually like literal. Like, it's like 90% mental. So like when I've been researching some of these guys like Janos Kouros, like the great Greek ultra runner who's like one of my heroes, he would take 3 months off after a race, 6 months off after a race. Sometimes he wouldn't even run between races, just because he believed that it's like a metaphysical sport, really. And
Yeah.
So like getting your headspace dialed maybe is more important than your physical preparation in some ways.
On that note, what's your personal view on the records that are being set? It almost feels like it's maxing out in terms of physical ability. I could be totally off on this, but I guess when I see a FKT set, right, it's usually within a day or within hours. I'm talking about these long through hike FKTs. So do you think that people are kind of maxing out in terms of their physical capacity to do these these FKTs, or do you think that there's going to be some kind of there's going to be a person in the future that's going to be able to shave a week off or something because they have just this crazy mental fortitude?
I think what's happening with that is like, because it was such a niche sport, there were less attempts at like these long trails happening like over time. So like there's like now there's more and more people attempting them, and like you know, the pandemic really brought a lot of like pro runners into the FKT world because there were no races. And so what you started seeing was like high level elite athletes getting into the world of FKTs, whereas before like it was just like a bunch of like outdoor freaks and weirdos doing this stuff. So I think that's been a part of like why you're seeing the numbers go lower and lower. And there are cases of people taking like, you know, big chunks of time off like previous records and stuff. But I think that, yeah, I just think they're, you know, the margins are getting smaller and smaller, like actually, and like it's not like you know, like when Joe did break the Arizona Trail record, you know, I mean, you saw the film, like he was a little disappointed, like he was on track to like blow it out of the water, and we hit the snow and all that stuff, and he still like set the record, but in his mind he's like I think someone will beat this soon. But in my mind I'm like, dude, like there probably are literally you know, single digit people that would even have on earth that would have a chance of breaking your record. And I don't think anyone's going to break it by like multiple days. And there have been some attempts by like pro runners since Joe that like they weren't able to, even with what we ran into, you know, they had good conditions and weren't able to do it. But yeah, it's an interesting question, like where the sport's going to go. Like I find myself becoming like less interested in it the more that it comes down to like like a pro athlete who has like all the resources and like, you know, stuff that you get for being a pro, and you know, and the more that emphasis is placed on like physical ability, it's just less interesting to me. Like I don't,
yeah,
you know.
Well, and even that, like I've seen some of the records I've looked at, the unsupported and supported times aren't even that far off from each other, which is insane to me that you can have a whole team in a sprinter van following you, and you're still not able to, like you said, put that much time away. It's just it just goes to show, like, yeah, like the physical limitations of what one person is capable of.
Yeah, it was interesting. You know, that was the record that Joe holds. That's probably the most, you know, for a lot of us, the most impressive record of them all was that he, you know, in I think it was 2015, Scott Jurek broke the, or 2017 maybe, broke the Appalachian Trail record. But this was like a, you know, Cliff Bar, like
it was for a movie.
I don't even know how many. Yeah, I don't even know how many thousands of dollars like were given to him, like full crew, massage therapist. And then the next year, Carl Meltzer, who is, you know, also like a
speed goat,
legendary ultra runner, came through with like Red Bull sponsorship and beat Jurek's time by not that much. And then the next year was when Joe came totally unsponsored with a pack on his back and beat both of their times by a pretty wide margin, doing it totally self-supported, you know. And
that's
like,
amazing.
I don't think anyone's going to get, there's maybe two people I can think of on earth that would maybe have a chance at that. The guy that did end up breaking the PCT record this summer, Josh Perry, he's like a younger guy from the UK. That's you know, he's kind of like you were saying in the last question, he's kind of this like newer generation that you know, has like some you know, I don't want to say it's an X factor because he works really hard for it, but like you know, he's you know, he seems to be able to take it to a different level. And you know, it's funny, Josh, you know, when I met Josh, because we were hanging around Southern California around the same time before we started our attempts, like Chris, you'll like this. He's like a huge Jeff Rosenstock fan, and like, I think he's like 26 or something. He's like, he's just like super into the like punk world and
Yeah.
stuff. And so I thought that was cool because I don't really meet anyone
Yeah.
that's out in the often that's into that stuff.
It's true though. Like, I think also what this conversation is kind of reminding me of is how popular the sport has gotten. And I think, it's cool. I don't really have an opinion on it. It's what's happening. I think that there are more eyes on these ultra races, these longer distance, attempts and challenges. And you can just see it and it's apparent. And I think it's a really cool thing. But what comes along with it, I think, for me personally, is this kind of glaze that gets put over it that is pretty ugly to me. I don't know how else to put it. Like, I've done some things and I've been a part of some projects, and I'm just going, this is so not what it's about, in my opinion. But that's, I guess, also the beauty of the sport, because it can kind of be anything. And it's definitely not my way of looking at it. I mean, but
yeah, I mean, when I did find you guys' like podcast, when I started following you, like it was because I could immediately recognize that this is like, like this seems like the kind of stuff I'm into as far as running, and everyone's, everyone can have their own angle and enjoyment. And, you find that in the thru hiking world there, there's people that are out there like, totally for the physical challenge, and there's like bros and jocks that are like, I'm going to defeat nature by doing this, that's like their outlook on it, and I think that's the same thing in the ultra running world, it's like, I think the thing that bothers me is like, I just hope that doesn't become like the dominant culture of the sport of it. It's like something I've tried to avoid my whole life, like the jocks and the bros and stuff, like,
I have to bring this up since we're kind of floating around this, but I noticed too that the year that you were in I think top 5 at Moab, you were there with Goggins. And so I was wondering if you had any stories of like racing that dude, what that was like.
Yeah, I mean, Goggins is, the first year I ran Moab, Goggins was there too. And like, I never heard of this guy. And all my friends were like, Goggins is there, I'm like, oh shit, this guy looks fucking brutal. Like, and I was running out kind of stupid the first year. I was with Mike McKnight, like probably 30 miles in, 40 miles in, who went on to win. And he's, probably the most winning 200 miler over time. But I remember like, and you're in the middle of the desert, like it's like brutal sun, everyone's wearing like sun shirts and stuff. And I turn around and I see this dude coming shirtless with like the shortest shorts I've ever seen. And it looks like Rambo is like coming up behind you. And I'm like, oh my God, and like, he passed me or whatever. But then he went on that year to get lost by like 15 miles off course. And then he came back and then he got sick at like one of the high altitude parts of the course, and had to drop out of the race that year. So I can say for that year I beat Goggins. But of course he he went to the hospital, he came back even though he had been disqualified from the race, and he like finishes the race on his own with his videographer. But he doesn't like come through the finish line. He like runs past the finish line and like adds one more mile to the race. So like, so the next year I'm like in the same exact spot, and I turn around and I see him come in like just brutal. And I'm like, all right, just look cool, man. Like, I tried to get my form together and just like, be like chilling. And like right when he was like 5 feet behind me, I don't know if it was just like his like presence or like his like energy or what, but I like cramped all through like my I don't know, and I like fell to the ground. and he like comes by and he looks down at me and he's like, "You all right, bro?" I was like, "I didn't want you to see me like this, man."
He got in your head.
He stole your soul, bro. He stole your soul. I don't know if you've read
Well,
any of his.
that year he got second, and he, the guy, an Italian runner, beat him, Mickey Graglia, and they're basically running together through the first night, and then Goggins picks up a pacer, and Mickey didn't have one, and apparently, there was like some Goggins like poking Mickey's chest, like poking him in the forehead, being like, "I'm gonna kill you," like like really actually trying to intimidate him.
Wow.
Holy
to
shit.
back off and stuff.
Yeah, he seems definitely. I don't know if you've listened to any of his books or read any of them, but they're pretty intense for sure.
I mean, I watch his like Instagram videos, like I find them to be pretty funny.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a lot of people out there taking it literally and like hurting themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. A friend of mine just had a kid actually and has been needing some like uplifting support in regards to like getting through the long nights, and he just texted me out of the blue and was like, "I love Goggins." And so then I was like, "Oh, that's great, man. I'm so happy you found him." And then like 2 weeks later, he was like, "What do you think Goggins would think about sickness? Should I just fight through it?" And I said, I don't know, man. The guy doesn't have any knees anymore. You might want to take some rest,
Yeah. I mean, I do have a lot of respect for Goggins, though, like straight up. I mean,
Yeah.
In most of these races, like he's like maybe one of two people of color there,
Mhm.
and I think it's important to like acknowledge that's part of like what Goggins is doing is like showing up and being visible as a person of color in like a sport that's like especially these ultras that are like really predominantly like white male dominated. So I respect Goggins a lot. Like I don't know like to what degree he's like a persona or not. Like every time I've had a conversation with him, he's been super nice and super supportive and kind of like sharing in the spirit of like the team spirit of the race. But I have also had people reach out to me that were about to run their first 24-hour race to try and break 100 miles for the first time solely because that's what Goggins did, and they had read his book, and they were experiencing injuries and we're not going to like take the time to heal or anything like that because Goggins wouldn't think that was legit or whatever. So but certainly an enigma.
Yeah, I think you have to. It's Goggins is a buffet, and you have to just take the pieces from him that seem to be the healthiest. Because if you try to take all of it, you're gonna feel like shit after.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with you. I mean, that's the stuff that I think I've connected with, at least when I look at his story, and the thing that I like about him, at least, which I think a lot of people don't take away, is that in one of his books, he talks about this dude, Akos Konya, right? And just, who's this like small runner dude. And I think that goes against so much of what he portrays, or what people take away from him, is this kind of masculine macho dude. It's like he gives the most respect to this like smaller runner guy who has a ton of like mental strength, and like that's the thing that he seems to admire the most in people, which I think is like, yeah, a very positive thing to take away. Not, you shouldn't try to like punish yourself or hurt yourself just because you think that's what the macho thing to do is.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't see Goggins. I feel like Goggins at this point is like pretty tame compared to like some of the newer like influencers and the stuff people are like saying and promoting now and running. Like Goggins is almost like old school at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some really toxic stuff going on. And I like luckily feel like I have a crew and friends and stuff that kind of like view it differently and like different ways and stuff. But like, yeah, I mean, there's some, like in any scene, it's like like when we were playing in the punk scene, like it would have been stupid to think that there wasn't bad stuff going on or like bad people involved or whatever, you know. I mean, um, you
Totally.
know, so I think acknowledging that type of stuff and keeping an eye on it is like important, you know.
Yeah.
I agree. For you, you've accomplished so much, but where are you going to next with all of it? Like, you know, because as I listen to you talk, you've accomplished so much, but you've gotten to such a like, it sounds like a supportive place with yourself, and you're kind of looking at the full picture, maybe rebalancing things out, taking care of yourself. But um, are you interested in getting back out on the Pacific Crest? Are you going to do more hiking? Are you going to maybe try some ultras? What's the future hold for you, man?
Well, I mean, honestly, like I've had one major goal like the whole time, you know, and like all of it's been training to try and run the longest race on earth, the Sri Chinmoy 3,100 mile self transcendence race in Queens, New York. I actually just got a message that this might be the year. So,
Oh shit.
Wow.
did I get an invite? So
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm crossing my fingers, but that's honestly like when back in 2018 when I started running, I, you know, like most people do, went down a rabbit hole on like Netflix and YouTube and consumed every, you know, like running thing I could find. And I remember watching the the original Barkley documentary,
oh yeah,
and then watching the 3,100 film that came out, and kind of at that moment being like, you know, Barkley seems sick, but I think my trajectory, like what I want to do, is run this race in New York, the longest race on earth. And so like most of the decisions I've made about the races I've done and the things I've done have been sort of like either consciously or subconsciously like leading to that, you know. And if I was able to finish that race, like I don't know, like I don't know what I would do. Maybe I'd stop running. I don't know, like after that, like
can you catch
but
can you catch also the listeners up who might not know about that race, and where it
so there's I guess like a monk would be the proper term, but a guy named Sri Chinmoy that started like a series of races and sort of like a running team. I want to say in like the 70s or 80s, but you know, approaching running as like a mindfulness exercise, as like a practice of meditation. And that was the angle that he took in designing the races that he put on. He lived in Queens, New York. And basically at this point, it's a worldwide organization of like people that kind of follow that same value system when it comes to running. But his, you know, his really famous race is called the Sri Chinmoy 3,100 mile self transcendence marathon. It's a 3,100 mile race around one block of Queens, New York. That's been running every year since I want to say the 90s, maybe even earlier. It's really under the radar of really any like running pop culture. Like it's not really covered in magazines or covered, you know. There was a documentary that was put out a few years back that I don't even think got that, you know, many like views or attention outside of runners that saw it, you know. And but yeah, it's just yeah, it's the longest sanctioned race on earth. It's I don't know. I mean, it just seems like
yeah, no,
ultimate. It is the ultimate.
It is the ultimate. Yeah. When we had that actually on our list of questions to ask you, and I'm really happy you got into it because.
Well, I'm not in. Like that's the hard part, right? Is like
sure
they only invite 10 to 12 runners every year. Wow. And most of those runners are people that are coming back from previous years.
Wow.
You know, there's not really a qualifier, but because I crossed the 1,000 kilometers in 10 days, that's sort of like a qualifier to run 1,000 kilometers in 10 days. And so I was able to sort of reach out. You know, it's really hard to like get in touch with the race. I mean, there's a guy named Shahishnu that is the race director that has like some old like Yahoo email address, and it's like, so I was able to finally get in contact and last year, and the race was already full, and he said, well, maybe next year. And right now, from what I can tell, they're waiting to see how many runners are going to come back and then how many spots they'll have for new people. But I don't think there's been like an American finisher in like quite a while. It's mostly international runners. So like hopefully in the next couple of weeks I'll know either way. But
I can't think of a better candidate. You'd be perfect for that. I honestly like just knowing you how I have, and it would just be so great to have a punk rocker hit that thing. Your soul is so perfect for it. And yeah, watching that documentary, I remember leaving it feeling intrigued by it. Like I knew it was never anything that interested me personally, but I could tell it had so much substance to it, and there's so much to it. It was just a very intriguing race to me.
Yeah, well, that's like when I came across y'all's page and saw the yin yangs on the shirts. I'm like, all right, this is maybe a good good group.
I'll make sure to get you one of those shirts.
But no, man, like straight up though, like the thing that I feel like the main lesson from all of this, kind of comes back to what we were talking about before. It's like meeting like the elders of like the community. Sure. And a lot of that is at these timed race events, and seeing guys in their 70s, women in their 80s that are still finding ways to push their own limits. Maybe they don't run as fast or as far as they used to, but for example, there's a guy named John Giesler that runs across the years every year, and he's a janitor from New York schools, and he he's one of the greats. At some point in time when he was younger, he held the 48-hour record, but now it's like his goal over 10 days is to run one loop every hour, which is not like an official thing, but it's like he doesn't wear a watch. Like he brings a wind up kitchen timer, and you'll just see him like assed out, like on a table, and like wind his timer. And when it rings, he's like, but that's hard to do because if it takes you 12 to 15 minutes to do a mile, that means the most consecutive sleep you'll ever get over 10 days is 40 minutes, 35 minutes. So I think what I've learned and internalized is that like I still want to be doing this when I'm 75 years old, 80 years old, like, and whatever it takes to make that happen, to avoid injury, to like prolong this thing that I love, is maybe the ultimate goal of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had a older guy named John Radich on last year who was a badass guy and had done Badwater like 15 times, and he served as a huge inspiration for us of like, it's just about finding a practice, a balance that you can hold on to throughout your life, and something that grounds you. And I think running is a good kind of way of centering yourself around everything, because it's like you touched on it earlier, but yeah, like you, even when it comes to like drinking, you're like, I don't know if I want to drink that much tonight because I have a run to do, or I want to run in the morning and feel good about it. So in that sense, it's great. When I was going through your Instagram, one of the things that really stood out to me that I respect a lot is a lot of the endeavors, things you were doing seem to incorporate like donations, or you highlight work that a lot of groups are doing, like No Mas Muertes, like no more deaths. And so I was just wondering if you could talk about that, and like if you want to highlight any of the work that like some of those groups are doing and for people to check out and stuff.
Yeah, man, thanks for asking about that. Like that usually doesn't come up, but yeah, I mean, I've been, from hiking the Pacific Crest Trail and the Continental Divide Trail and the Arizona Trail, you become aware of like the realities of like the borderlands, the U.S. borderlands, and you literally see with your own eyes, like the militarization. You see the remnants of migration. You even meet people that are coming through, and it puts into perspective for me, like how much of a privilege it is to be able to like go out and like run through the desert and not, with the gear that you need, with the information that you need, and without having to be worried about like border patrol, like, coming after you. And it's a chosen, in some ways, like through hiking and long distance running is like a chosen migration, that we get to choose to do that. And for a lot of people in the world making some really more impressive journeys than anything I've ever heard of, like walking to the US from like Guatemala or Honduras, like it puts like through hiking the Appalachian Trail into a lot of perspective. Like it's pretty easy to hike the Appalachian Trail. And like, so I started raising money for No Mas Muertes after being in the deserts down there. And then I started like going there myself to volunteer, and over the last few years, I probably spend a month or two a year down there on the border. It's motivated me to, partially it's motivated me to stay fit, which, motivates me to run because of the nature of doing humanitarian aid work at the border. It motivated me to get more like medical training, to become an EMT, but yeah, I mean, like, it just seems like, so I guess this goes back to like what I find toxic about a lot of the like running world is like, it's a very, self-satisfied thing, it's like, oh, I broke my PR, I did this or whatever. But it seems like there's got to be more like, it's like, why are you getting strong? Like, why are you becoming fit? Like, is it just for yourself, or does it allow you to now like help other people? Like it doesn't seem like it should just end at like your success in like a race or something. It seems like you're building your ability to show up for like stuff like humanitarian aid work or whatever. Like, at least for me, that's like what it feels like, and a lot of this, also like just like the weird skill set of being like a long distance hiker. Like it's super applicable to carrying, 80-pound packs through the desert, like off trail, navigating, cross country through the desert and finding passes where people are traveling through to have a better life, so it just made a lot of sense, like something that I can actually tangibly do that and apply this like weird skill set that I've gained, but yeah, shout out to No More Deaths. Shout out to Wings of America is another organization that I like to raise money for, which is like a Native youth running program. I think it's important when we talk about like the spiritual side of running, and what it provides for us to also understand that like Native populations have been doing prayer runs and utilizing running as a tool for I don't know, centuries.
Yeah,
of course,
and also have been the victim of having that intentionally taken away from their culture, and then on top of that, being told they're not welcome in the places that we like to do this stuff. So they're a great organization. Outdoor Afro is one that I try to raise money for, that's encouraging people of color to come onto the trails. It's mostly about through hiking and outdoor sports, but it's something I see every year whether I'm on trail myself for fun or working on the Appalachian Trail, is just a total lack of representation out there, and something that I personally think is the future of it all, is to open it up, like instead of sort of this like death grip that like the old white boy club of like holds on these public spaces and trails. Like, and they're worried about like, oh, we don't have any young people that are like coming along to do trail work and volunteer. Oh, it's because no one wants to be around you fucking curmudgeons. You know what I mean? Um, like, so yeah, I think that is like a solution to a lot of the problems out there is like encouraging, like it's the most important thing when we talk about conservation, and that's a loaded term, but when we start talking about all that kind of stuff, like yeah, I think it's really important. So
that's just awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be sure to link in the show notes to all the organizations you mentioned too.
thanks. Yeah.
Again, I'm so glad that you brought that up of like why we're doing this for ourselves. Like if we're not doing it for someone else, or if we're not there to help someone else, why are we even getting strong? What's the point? And that struck a chord with me. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like a guy like Goggins, it's like he's, I've noticed that term gets thrown around a lot in ultra running. Like a lot of these guys are like, I'm a warrior or whatever, you know what I mean? But that's like, it's become such a bastardized like term, especially through the pandemic and stuff, where everything became so like individual focused, so like internal focused, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna be a warrior by like not getting vaccinated. I'm standing up by,
Mhm.
whereas like someone in the past that really was strong, that really like was a warrior, like, they do it on behalf of their community, of their society, you know what I mean? So like kept thinking to myself, like all of these, strong people, that just seem so afraid,
Yeah.
are kind of like missing the point of all of that. And, like it's the kind of just shit that goes through my head when I'm running, unfortunately. Like it's weird because I guess maybe from playing in an anarchist punk band for a long time or whatever, but like I don't think a lot about for some reason, like the stuff that comes into my head when I'm running, the thought process are very like socio-political and stuff. It's like I'll be like 200 miles into the Moab race, and like I'm thinking about like modern fascism. It's like what I'm thinking about, like listening to Little Peep, like thinking about like the end of the world. you know
Well, this maybe kind of leads into our final question then, because I'd love to get your take on this. And we asked this question to all of the uh, runners. And thank you so much for being on the show, Whit. We really appreciate having you. But
Yeah.
What would be your runner's high?
Hmm. I can kind of describe it. I feel like I've reached it. I mean, there's certainly different levels of it, but there's like that kind of second wind high, that you can get on your daily run where you're kind of like down and out and everything hurts. Then all of a sudden, it's like it just feels effortless. There's that kind of runner's high. There's like a clarity of mind that often comes with running, where you can, and I think I first experienced this with through hiking, but it's like, we live in such a like, I think you guys probably know the term like attention economy, but it's like, there's so many things like grasping for your attention at all times, that it makes it hard to really sit with a thought. And one of the coolest things about running and hiking to me is the ability to like have a thought, not feel like you have like a time limit to like think about that thought. Like you can examine it from like all these different like angles and like actually work through stuff in your mind. To me, that's part of the runner's high. But the first time I really think I got like super high was across the years, and or maybe was able to sustain it was across the years, because it was easier to like feed my physical body. But I kind of came up with the term crystallized running is how I felt, where like it's like nothing hurts, you feel like you're floating. You're just kind of like soft gazing on the horizon, and like hours and hours just go by. You know, and you feel gratitude, and you think about the people you love, and you know, maybe shed a few tears, but it's a beautiful thing, you know. And that's I think what I have been pursuing, you know, is like it seems like the more you wear down your physical self, like the more raw you become, the easier it is to like access this like high, you know. And I think the PCT last summer, like maybe it got a little too far out. So,
Well, Witt, thank you so much for coming on the pod. I just,
yeah, thank you guys so much, man. This was a great running conversation. I don't often get to have them like this. So.
Yeah, thank you. It's inspiring in a lot of different ways. So thank you for sharing all that stuff too.
Yeah, I can't wait to get out to LA and go on one of y'all's group runs.
Hell yeah. Let's do it.